What if we were to take a psychological approach to evolutionary astrology and look at the archetypes from the inside out? What would it say about a new moon in Aries with seven planets in Aries? Let's take a look at this. Welcome, everyone. I wanted to jump on here and talk about the new moon. And before I do, I want to kind of explain how I'm going to be looking at this, what kind of a lens I'm using, if you will. I've been studying astrology for a while now, and I started seeing glimpses here and there of a way of looking at it that kind of comes from the inside out, and it's it's what I've come to call a psychological lens of astrology. Um, this isn't anything that I've invented. There are several different modalities that use this kind of a way of seeing things, like Carl Jung's depth psychology, where he talks about individuation through uniting the anima and the animus within your psyche, the masculine and the feminine sides of how we think. There's a mythological psychology view that Joseph Campbell uses, and I really like seeing mythology through that lens. I really feel like that is what a lot of these people that wrote these myths had in mind when they wrote them. It's a way to describe the human psyche. It's not necessarily about the story, it's about relating it symbolically to our inner psychology. And so we're going to bring some of that in through some of the asteroid goddesses and, things in that nature. But just in general, that's the way that I see the chart. Another method is like Gnosticism, and then some forms of Buddhism look at it in that way. And so I think it's important to acknowledge, some of these other ways, but I think the reason that it transcends these different modalities is because they're principles of truth. And that is something that when you hear it and when you see it, you can feel it. It transcends the different modalities. So the biggest one that I like to use is the most modern one that we've got now, and that is IFS therapy. It's parts work, started by Richard Swartz, and I've done a lot of IFS therapy myself, and it has been hugely important in the way that I've learned to see things. And I think that I highly recommend it for anybody. And I want to get this out of the way. I'm not a therapist. I'm not going to try and, dispense therapeutic stuff. But if we talk about how we can use the archetypes to learn about our inner psychology, and if that's something you're interested in, then maybe hit the like and subscribe button, and we'll see how this unfolds. But this is actually something that is developing. It's something I started seeing a while ago, as I said, and it's probably going to evolve as we continue to move forward. The astrology method that I was trained in and learned through is the evolutionary astrology methods through Jeffrey Wolf Green. And so we're going to have a lot of that, but I'm trying to incorporate seeing it through this psychological lens, and I think it's helpful, and hopefully you guys find it helpful too. So I'm going to share this chart. Let's bring this up and get into it and start talking about the the new moon here. So, one of the things I want to point out is I like to look backwards kind of at what's been going on so that we can understand the context of where we're at here. And one of the biggest things that I can see here that I want to talk about is Neptune in a new phase with Saturn. And if you're looking at this through a psychological lens, um, it spent a lot of time going through a balsamic phase in Pisces before it moved into Aries and went new phase at the 0 degrees Aries point, which is, recognized as like the beginning of the zodiac. And I think that's significant because a lot of people have talked about this, that it hasn't happened there. A lot of people have gone back a long ways. There's different ideas of when it did or if it did. And, I think that just the significance of looking back, because Neptune and Saturn are on a 36-year cycle. And so they come conjunct every 36 years. But to have that happen at the 0 degrees Aries point in this kind of a climate, I think is significant. And so let's talk about what I think it was doing as it went balsamic through the Pisces, through the end degrees of Pisces. I think it was dissolving structures of how our inner psychology works. And what I mean by that is Saturn is about rules and it's about authority and how things work and structures. And so when we go through Pisces, Neptune can dissolve things and it dissolves illusions so that we can see the truth of things. And so with Neptune, Saturn culminating into Neptune, I feel like it has dissolved some of the rules that the parts systems in our inner psychology worked from and followed that kind of broke down. And they've probably been operating in that way for a very long time. And this gives us an opportunity as we move into Aries to start something new and to change our inner psychology and this and restructure how this inner psychology works. And there's different ways that this can happen. I think it's going to happen whether we're conscious of it or not, but it gives us this opportunity to engage it consciously and move through it in a way that we can become more self-led. And the way that I've learned to look at this is the center of the chart. I picture a self energy here. I played around with some graphics to try and get that to come through, but I'm not quite sure how to do it. Maybe in the future I'll come up with something that shows that. But uh, I think that the goal here is to try and be able to expand our inner awareness, our self energy enough so that we can feel the different sides of the polarities of each of these archetypal axes. You have the Aries Libra, Taurus Scorpio, Gemini Sag, Cancer Capricorn, and so on. And so when we have this much energy in Aries, I think it's important to bring in the polarity. And the polarity of Libra is how do we engage in relationships with others? And if we're looking through a psychological lens, how do we engage with the parts of ourselves? This is the inner community. And this is where I want to bring in Pluto. Pluto is the bottom line in evolutionary astrology, and it's breaking new ground in Aquarius. And what I mean by that is it's just about to go retrograde fairly soon. I'm not sure exactly when. We can look forward and see. But so that means that it's further into Aquarius than it's been in our lifetimes. It's a 250-year cycle for one orbit, and it's settling into Aquarius. It's going to be there probably for about 20 years, and I think that what we're doing with that is we're exposing how our inner community is operating. And we're looking to the polarity point of Pluto, which is in Leo. And that is, how do we show up as an individual? And how do we express our individuality within our inner family system, inner psychology? There's different ways that you can engage in relationship, and this is where I want to bring in the patriarchy. And I know I look at the patriarchy as just this power over ideology. And we've been operating in a patriarchal society and system for a long time now. There's different arguments about how long and what happened before that, and if it's going to continue or what happens after that. And my opinion is that that kind of environment has affected our inner psychology. I think it affects every single aspect of our lives, how we show up in society, how our schools are structured, how our government is structured. But the way that what I'm going to talk about here is how your inner psychology is structured. And I like to talk about this in a power over dynamic. And this is Libra, right? The scales of justice is the symbol for Libra. And Libra is not balanced, it's seeking balance. And I think that it reflects back to us ways in which it's out of balance. And then that affects how we show up as an individual, our Aries side, who we are and how we identify as ourselves. And that starts to tip into this masculine and feminine parts of our psychology. And so when you have a, a, an inner psychology that's operating through this patriarchal lens, it's a dominant side. And so this side is dominant over the feminine side, which is receptive and curious and holds space and is the form. So we've got the force and the form on, both sides of this. And how do we balance that? If we notice that we're operating through this power dynamic, this power over ideology, does the feminine need to just get stronger and compete and get big to take over? Well, that's a masculine form of expression. And so that's not going to work. That's not how this works in my view. The way through this is to sit down with these parts of ourselves, our psyche, that are maybe more reactive and have this urgency behind them and feel this desire to force their way through things. And then this kind of brings in the mythological psychology that I like to talk about. A lot of these myths talk about how a feminine figure is overpowered by a masculine figure, and then maybe they're exiled, or they come back. Like the story of Medusa comes to mind, and she self isolates, and she's got this ugly part of herself, turns everybody to stone. And so the way that I see this is, there was a part of our inner psychology that saw this ugly part of ourselves that as weak or whatever, and it's the most ugly parts of ourselves that we self isolate. And this is like an exile in inner family systems. And at that point, there are a lot of protection strategies that form around that. And in the story, she turns other people to stone just looking at them. And that's, I think is moments in time where that memory flashes up and we see it, and it's an ugly part of how our we view ourselves, and we kind of identify with that, and we don't like that, so we push it down and we don't want to see it, and we might ruminate on these frozen moments of time over a period. And in the story, Perseus comes with this highly polished shield and a sword, and uses the reflection to be able to look at her and find her and cut her head off without actually looking directly at her, so he doesn't get turned to stone. And I think that's reflective of, we can't really look directly at these exiled parts of ourselves. We have to do it through protectors. And these protectors can show up as managers or firefighters. There's a lot of different ways that can happen, but we have to see it through projection. We project these parts of ourselves onto other people so that we can have it reflected back to us, and that's how we work through it on a psychological level. So to get back to the astrology of this, this is how I see this inner psychology playing out right now. There's a lot of masculine energy present, and that isn't bad. Like, masculine energy is not bad, but it wants to be. Uh, we want to work with it, with our self energy in the center, to be able to hold the relationality of the other side. So if we have a part of ourselves that is afraid, um, the best thing to do is to sit next to this part on the couch in an equal way, and to try and understand why it's afraid. What are you afraid is going to happen if we don't act in a certain way, or if we act at all? And so if we can sit with these parts long enough to understand why they're afraid, then we can start to speak for them rather than from them. And so maybe we can save ourselves from becoming reactive with other people and it getting projected out onto other people. And so I also believe that this is asking us to take action in the world. Saturn wants us to take action and become self led. And how we act and how we do this, I think, is being reflected in this Mercury and uh, Mars balsamic relationship to Saturn. It's kind of a cautionary tale. There may be parts of us that want to go, and parts of us that have their foot on the brake. So we might have one foot on the gas and one foot on a brake, and there's this inner confusion going on. I mean, Neptune and Saturn are still conjunct. It's kind of in the late phases of it, but they're still conjunct. And there can be some confusion about what's emerging. What are we discovering about ourselves? What are we discovering about our inner psychology? And that's that calling to sit with these parts of ourselves to understand. Another thing that I want to talk about is this inconjunct with the South Node and Lucifer here. And I think that this is calling for an internal adjustment to how we take actions on our desires and how we're thinking about them. And we need to let go of some of the old programming. It's just because we have maybe become aware of some of this doesn't mean that our nervous system isn't still trained to go into a hypervigilant mode and brace for something. And I think that this is parts of ourselves that are afraid to move forward, or afraid of what's going to happen. And so if we can sit with these parts long enough to understand what their needs are. This is what I think that Venus and is doing here in Taurus. It's a somatic way of feeling into those parts of ourselves so that we can understand their needs. They're going to let us know. And if you've ever done any parts work with a therapist, I highly recommend. Once I said, as I said before, they're going to ask you, where do you feel this part in your body? Do you feel it in your chest? Do you feel it on maybe on your side in your gut? Is it in your head? Is there space between you? And that's what the beauty of this parts language is when you just proclaim this is a part of me, it psychologically gives you some space so that you can objectify or see it before it gets projected out into, onto other people, onto the world. Anytime that we maybe feel like a victim, or something like that, we could reflect back, because that's not self energy. I'm going to post a list of the 8 C's, which is the self energy. I'll put it in there. I can't think of them right off the top of my head, but that tells you if you're in self energy or not. If you're feeling victimized or urgency to act or anger or anything other than this calm sense of presence, then we know we're not in self energy, and we can understand that's a part of us, and we can put some space between those parts of us and try to understand and relate to them in a way. One of the things that happened to me when I started working with parts is my first reaction was, I have parts. Well, how do I get rid of them? And that is a masculine way of thinking about things. It's a penetrating way. Like, if you think about who we are in community, how we're expressing our individuality within our inner community, and maybe you're put yourself in this part's shoes and think about how it would feel to be told, well, how do I get rid of you? How do I get rid of this part? That's not effective. They will tend to shut down. They'll go into the corner and they'll build a volcano and build resentment. And eventually that volcano is going to go off. And that's going to be some of this anger and reactivity that we're talking about. And so when we have that, I feel like I'm kind of repeating myself. When we have that anger and reactivity, we need to jump in a relational way, jump maybe a little bit aggressive. But we need to come through this relational way of being that is open and curious. And if we can understand why they feel that way, witness the feelings and let it pass through. Emotions have a beginning and they also have an end. And so if we stop it halfway through and isolate it and put it aside, the human psyche is an amazing thing. We can hide parts of ourselves from our consciousness, and that stuff that's buried in our unconscious comes out one way or another. And like I said, I feel like that's what we end up projecting onto other people so that we can have it reflected back to us and move through it. So let's talk about the new moon now. This new moon, I've actually got it to where the moon is in. It's a little bit past the new moon, but uh, right now it's in Aries, and we are right here in a new phase to Chiron. Sorry, I got a little off track there because the new moon is happening in Aries, and I want that to be very clear. But it's in a new phase to Chiron. And I think the purpose of that is just amazing to have this happen with all this new phase to Saturn, Neptune, and the balsamic nature of Mercury and Mars in there. I think that what we're doing with this is it's trying to shine a light so that we can see clearly some of the ways that we've been wounded. And if we look at Chiron, that's the hero's journey. And we're never going to be able to get rid of this wound, but it's the place where we feel the most wounded. It's the apex wound. And if we can start to see this in a new way, and we can change how we relate to our inner psyche, we can learn to be more self-led. It's never going to be perfect. And I think that's one of the mistakes that a lot of people make. I know I certainly did. I wanted to do this perfectly, and you're going to make mistakes. But the relational way to address mistakes is to go back and repair rather than ignore it, act like it didn't happen, try to be right. These are all very power over dynamics and ways of dealing with something that may be viewed as a mistake. And so I don't like to even think of it as a mistake. It's just information so that we can choose to come at it a different way in the future. And so the most important part of this is to not show up uh, in this penetrating, aggressive way to the rest of our psyche. If we can just relax and find some peace within, which is, easier said than done. I'm not saying this is easy, but I'm saying that we have this opportunity to move forward in a new way. And these outer planets move very slowly. And I think that this is something that's so new that we can't quite see where it's going yet, but we're called to take action anyway. I think that a lot of us are feeling instinctual ways of moving forward, and where this shows up in your chart matters. For me, it's in the end of my first house, the beginning, into my second house, and so it's a lot about my identity and who I'm going to be in my self worth and value. And if you've got it in a different part of your chart, this is going to show up in different ways. And I'm not going to go into all of that. That may be something that I do in the future. But for now, I just wanted to introduce these dynamics and talk about it and start to get us used to looking at the astrology in this way so that we can expand on it and move forward. I find new insights every day, and the way I see it today may be different from the way I see it in 6 months. I don't know. But I think that right now we're seeing Venus is culminating into Uranus, and that's going to meet and go new phase in the beginning of Gemini. And I think that's going to be a big change. I think that it's gonna expose some of the ways that we've thought about things in our inner psychology, and it may even uh, abruptly change how we think and communicate through that inner psychological lens. And so we can talk more about that maybe in a separate video. But in any event, I just wanted to introduce myself, explain how I'm going to start to try and describe the astrological weather. And hopefully, if you guys find value in this, go ahead and subscribe, like it, share it, all the things. And we're going to continue to come back and talk about this more as we move forward. And if you have any questions about this, feel free to post comments on the videos. I'm happy to respond. I love talking about it. It's my passion, and so I'm really looking forward to it. But if you guys Anyway, if we want to continue this journey, let's do it. I'm looking forward to how this turns out. And that's it for now. Bye, guys.